Good evening. So, welcome to the Institute of Design. Thank you for braving this miserable weather out there to come today. Thank you for those of you joining online. For context, it's actually 74 degrees outside, so that was a joke. Apparently, Chicago is actually setting a record for October temperatures today. My name is Anijo Mathew. I am the Interim Dean of the Institute of Design. And this is the week of our 85th anniversary. So I'm very pleased that you have decided to join us today on a Friday evening. We do have alcohol, but it's still something that you're here. Over the course of the week, we had numerous events and conversations to celebrate the great legacy of this school. And on Wednesday, we celebrated our birthday. And at that time, I made a promise that we will not just talk about our past. So today, we are going to talk about the future. So in the afternoon, we had a great session where we spoke about what our faculty are doing in terms of future research. And today, I'm honored to welcome two fantastic guests to talk about the future of design education. So I'm going to introduce them one by one. Daniel Barcza is the Vice-Rector at Moholy-Nagy University of Art and Design in Budapest, Hungary. MoMA, as it is commonly known, is one of the oldest design universities in Europe. He's also the Deputy Director of MoMA Innovation Center and is tasked with thinking about the future of the university and future of design education. He works on social design projects, especially in rural villages, and teaches teaches design to MBA students. But his real expertise, apparently, is in fire engines and teddy bear rescue with his young kids. With MoMA, we share a great legacy through our founder, László Moholy-Nagy. And when we found out that the MoMA team was going to be here, we thought it would be a perfect opportunity to combine our forces to talk about what design looks like from two different contexts. And we wanted to learn a little bit about what our contemporaries across the Atlantic are doing and what they're thinking. So it'll be interesting to see how these worlds intersect. Our second guest is familiar to most of you. Patrick Whitney is professor in residence at the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health. He was invited to Harvard by Ashish Jha. For some of you, that name may be familiar. He is the White House response coordinator for COVID. He's the COVID czar. So I think it's safe to say that Patrick is doing some amazing stuff at Harvard, and he's going to send us some Harvard undergrads next year, right, Patrick? Yes, yeah. For most of us, however, we know him as the former dean of the Institute of Design. He was at ID for 40 years, and in capacity of chair, director, dean, he served for 28 years. Isn't that something? I encourage you to check out the exhibition to see the impact that Patrick has had on the design field and in ID particularly. He's one of the pioneers of human-centered design, or design thinking as most people know it. In 2006, he was named a design visionary by Business Week, combining the fields of business and design. But it is his recent publications in design and education that got me interested. So I invited him today to honor his many years of service to ID, of course, but for him to share his perspective on where and what we are going to do in the future. So this is what we're going to do today. Both Daniel and Patrick are going to join me in conversation about the future of design and the future of design education. I asked each of them to give us a small presentation, 7 to 10 minutes only, I'll be keeping time, on where they think design education is today and where it is going. After that, we'll talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to question and answers. All good? Yes? Shall we get started? So to get started, let's invite Daniel Barcza to the stage, and I will pull up your presentation. Please give a round of applause.
So good evening everyone. It's an honor to be here, and to be honest, I'm a little bit emotional in this moment because standing in the steps of Moholy-Nagy is always a big thing, really. And I'm really honored to represent my university, Moholy-Nagy University of Art and Design, which is the very institution where László Moholy-Nagy has started his education career and left then to Germany and then came to America. So another name that you can connect to our university is Ernő Rubik, the famous inventor of Rubik Cube. And this university is quite an old one. It's almost 150 years old, and during this time it managed to renew itself from time to time. Every 25, 30 years, it managed to renew itself. And I'm quite privileged to be part of the latest renewal process, which we have done in the last 5 or 7 years. First, we completely rethought the physical environment of the campus. We had a large campus development project like you had here, and we created contemporary and very inspiring buildings for education. We created a technology park full of studios and workshops, and we created an innovation center, which is one of the biggest in Central Europe, and it's exclusively focusing on art and design research and innovation. And we created inspiring spaces for learning for the students. We completely rethought the way we teach, and we created similar spaces that you have here, open studios where interdisciplinary collaboration is supported. However, we need to do something more, and this is the Future University project, which I'm leading now. And it is focusing on rethinking and redesigning design education, the way how we teach, and the way how students learn at the university, the complete portfolio and the complete model of the education. So I will introduce you to some of my heroes, and I will show you some challenges what we're facing. So let me introduce Benedek. He's a 12 years old teenager. He is very active and he's very adventurous, but he basically loves video games. And this is his life. He's always connected to the internet. He is always connected to his friends on the internet. 50% of the time he lives in the internet. And he learns quite a lot from online, but his learning patterns is very different. Due to the video games that he is trained on, he has an attention span for 2 minutes, and every 2 minutes he needs a positive feedback, preferably a kind of reward, preferably dopamine reward. So he is a real dopamine junkie, and it's very hard to put him in the classroom. And his cognitive capacity differs from previous generations' cognitive capacity. The way his brain is structured is a little bit different. His cortex is different than, for example, my cortex. This is the way how the brain and the cognitive learning process is changing in the alpha generation. He is heavily dyslexic. He cannot read 2 sentences, but he is extremely good in visual thinking. He is the real alpha generation, and he's my son. Okay, let's see another hero. let me introduce Joseph and Eve. They are living in a remote village in Hungary, in a Roma community, and they don't have tap water in the house, running water in the house. They don't have gas. They only have electricity. And they live a very, very simple life in a very simple environment. However, if a bank in, let's say, in United States go bankrupt, or a gas pipeline is just shut down from some 1,000 kilometers away, he cannot feed his family. Or alternatively, if the banks in the US or in Europe and Asia is blooming, the bank sector, and the gas pipe is not closed, then they are experiencing floods every year in their house due to climate change-induced floods. So the world they are living in, despite they are living in a very simple life, the world is extremely, extremely complex. Environmental, social, and economic realm are intertwined, and systems are intertwined. And it's a big challenge for us how to educate the next generation for this. He is, let me introduce Mikhailo Bokotay. He is a Ukrainian glass artist, glass designer. I haven't met him in person. However, I had the chance to be online or in a hotline in May when the Ukrainian war has started. Ukraine is a neighboring country to Hungary. And together I try to help them to evacuate their students from Lviv. And finally, their students decided to stay, not to leave the country. So those artist students who studied glass art and fine art and things like that quickly learned to use weapons, quickly learned to create Molotov cocktails. The boys went to the front line, the girls went to help them. So quickly changed the skill sets and adapted to the situation. It is, again, a very, very strong challenge for the future to be adaptive. Let me introduce you to Emily. She's a doctorate student of ours, and she's working with artificial intelligence platforms. She's not designer. She is a social scientist, and she creates avatars for herself. And these are artificial avatars created by Midjourney platform, but it's not necessarily the platform itself which is important. But the fact that we were told several years ago that creativity is an inherently human value, and it turns out it can be put in algorithm in some ways. And it's a question if human creativity will be sidelined in the next few years or not. And finally, some tectonic changes. Climate change is here, and we need to adapt to it. If you happen to visit Hungary, Budapest, you will realize that this picture is not correct. In the middle of the picture should be the biggest river, the Danube of Europe. So this is a visualization of the future, how Budapest will change in the next, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years. We need to adapt for this situation, and we need to adapt for the changes. And finally, we see that change is coming. We see that the traditional education methods in higher education is not valid anymore. It's not unprecedented what's going on at the moment. It is almost the same situation when Moholy-Nagy László left Hungary, went to Germany, and then came here to the US. And I believe we need to be similarly brave and create a new type of education for the future generation. We need to create a new Bauhaus or a Bauhaus 3.0. Thank you very much.
So next I'm going to call up Patrick to give his perspective.
Good evening. How many in the room have had a 4-year undergraduate program in design? That's a lot, about half. And how many have had a 2- or 3-year master's program in design? Yeah. And my bet is that most of the undergrads, people who've had their hands up for undergrad education, are heavily weighted towards the Department of Art and Design that they were in. It's going to be skewed towards a design school because I'm guessing a large number of you are from the Institute of Design. But design has been, education has been owned by, captive by 4-year undergraduate programs and 2-year master's programs. This is going to change. It's going to get turned upside down. One of the worst businesses a school could be in right now, I think, is undergraduate design education. We phased it out here, not because we didn't love the students. They were great. They were very rewarding. But we didn't have the resources to deal with a growing master's program and a good-sized undergraduate program at the same time. So I'm going to talk about core knowledge and specialized knowledge. So design emerged about 170 years ago as a landmark for the Crystal Palace exhibition. And what that was about is designers helped manufacturers who had the new factories humanize the things that were coming out of them. And they did styling and manufacturing, and they did some very interesting early human factors work. That changed around after the Second World War, and rather than standards and growth with these specialties, these are specialties of design, styling, manufacturing, human factors, it switched to branding, systems management, and quality. These didn't go away. These came out on top of them. Thank you. In the last few years, we've been talking about interaction design, design strategy, service. It's responding to this flexibility and choice. Some of us call it the economy of choice. It's not really very much choice. It's the image of choice. You notice this when you go to buy Crest toothpaste in Walgreens. How many varieties of Crest are there? And then don't mention the Colgate and the other ones down by the side. We've got too many things being made for people who already have too many things. So that's, frequently designers define themselves as an interaction designer or a strategy designer or a branding designer or a human factors designer, and as if they're different things. And when service design emerged recently. They say that it was the replacement of strategic design. And some people are saying that human-centered design is dead. I said it about a year ago, but I was wrong. I disagree with that now. There's other ways designers can design themselves. They can call themselves. They can do it by what they do, sort of what materials they use, what processes they use. And all of it is missing the point that at the core of it all is core knowledge for design. What is core knowledge for design? Modes of experience, being able to do field observation, patterns of use, behavioral prototypes, conceptual prototypes, understanding value, understanding abstraction. These are things designers do. And we don't do them in a very formal way. We do them in a haphazard way. But it's all based on this model of make and use. This is the core of design. This is knowledge in here. Before the Industrial Revolution, makers and users were in the same village. Before there were many villages, before there were craftsmen in villages, people made their own things. But those got ripped apart by the Industrial Revolution. And what happened is, in the 80s or 90s, we came up with this idea of human-centeredness because we had abandoned it. You know, companies come up with slogans to deal with the problems they're causing, not to do with the things they're good at. So some of you might remember Ford Motor Company had a terrible quality problem in their cars. So their slogan was, anyone remember it? Quality is job one. So you can tell what's not working in the company by what they're lying about. So when we started to put chips in stuff, chips went into typewriters and created word processors. Chips went into video players, and they were hard to use. And engineers would quickly show how a product was easy to use, but in fact it wasn't. And so we rather than them living in the same village, we created models of human-centeredness. Personas. How many in the room use personas? Yeah, personas are a model of a user, sometimes even based upon user research. But more and more often based on the fantasies of designers. Behavioral prototypes, where you're not prototyping something to see if it can be made, manufacturing prototype, but you're prototyping it to see how people will behave with it. Those are things that we did to make up for the fact that we have been ripped away from the users. The human-centered design has failed for the most part. And it's not dead yet, but we all need to work at making it useful again. Now what's the problem? The main focus is human-centered design does projects like turning beeps into chimes and making things physically comfortable. You'll see in the archives of the school, these wonderful wooden carvings done by Moholy students and J. Dalvin students that were pieces of wood molded, carved, sanded, polished, to fit into your hand. They're wonderful objects. Who here wants to limit their life to listening to being chimed at instead of beeped at, or things being comfortable and that's all that? How many in here think design can do more than that? Yeah, me too. But we've been 30 years stalled at where we are. I remember conversations with the ID faculty when we were putting in the new PhD program, and we were going to redo the master's program. What should we call it? The names then were product design, visual design for communications, was a terrible name, and photography. And Greg Pregrocki came up with the idea of saying, don't modify those things. What we do is planning, and we make things human-centered. So let's call it planning and human-centered design. That was in late 80s. We were declared one of the inventors of human-centered design. It wasn't obvious that we should call it human-centered design. There was an argument amongst the faculty, should it be user-centered design or human-centered design? Human-centered design seemed a little soft. User-centered design was tougher, but that was in the era of just say no and cocaine running the streets of American cities, and user-centered design sounded too druggy. So we called it human-centered design, and we sent a note out to the world, and I got 3 phone calls that week saying, you can't call it human-centered design. And I said, why not? And they said, because it's a God-centered world, not a human-centered world. So names are relevant. But the problem is there's so many ways that we need to serve people. The world of work is changing in very bad ways. One of my colleagues in the School of Public Health and I were talking about it, and I ventured to say, how much is the decline of jobs for 50-year-old General Motors workers and other people in that industry causing the opioid problem? And she had been the commissioner of health for New York and knew those answers, and she said a lot. You know, when people get depressed, they look for ways to become undepressed, and will turn to alcohol or drugs. Equity and justice and equity and income. A bunch of people, middle-class people and lower middle-class people, feel they're getting a raw deal. They think the world isn't fair. And they're right. We know that the very rich are taking more than their fair share. Human-centered web. We use the web all the time, but the problem with the web is its genetic code is set up to gather information from users so they can sell us stuff. That's the purpose of the web. What if the genetic code of the web, the way it was set up, was to understand what we were interested in and prompted us with things that would support our interests and introduce us to new things that might relate to those interests. And if we wanted to go into shopping mode, we could turn a switch and say, let's do some shopping. Climate change, environmental problems in general. Another problem with human-centered design is, along with innovation, they are the 2 driving forces of the misuse of materials and the filling landfills beyond capacity. How many in the room have a drawer or a shelf filled with phones that still work and cameras that work? Yeah. So the alternative is to throw them out, right? We don't use them anymore. AI is is presenting a major problem in that AI-based software is writing next-generation software, which writes the next-generation software. And as Bill Joy, founder of Sun Computer, pointed out, it's soon, probably he meant about now, it's a time when people aren't going to be able to understand the software that's governing our banks and hospitals and things like that. You know, hospitals have become data-driven. And it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was the article about hospitals getting rid of beds for children because there were more procedures tied with older people, and they wanted to put older people in those beds so they could get more money from them than serving the kids. Something wrong with that? So, of course, we should make things easier to use. And it's not bad to have things chime at us, although it gets a little tiring. But there are some big issues here that go beyond the client's needs and deal with the needs of humanity. And if designers don't address fixing it, who's going to? I mean, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So I changed my mind. I was wrong a year ago when I said human-centered design was over. It's just terribly sick and anemic, and it needs to uplift itself by dealing with some of those things. And the good news is these things are good for all of society and will help companies too. Organizations are the doers of activity in our society. People don't do things by themselves. It's organizations that do. In our work, Andre Noriega, a graduate of this school and a colleague of mine at Harvard, and I are working on a design for well-being model where we're after improving the condition of people, organizations, and the environment through health, happiness, and prosperity. Now that sounds really, it's flakier than it felt when we were using the word human-centered design. You know, it sounds too do-goody. But those are what we need to aspire to make a difference in the world. Now, what's this got to do with the future of design education? You probably are aware of the engineering schools and the business schools and the medical schools, schools of public health that are adopting parts of design. 3 evenings ago, I was at the opening of MIT's new initiative. They have a $100 million gift to organize the different design activities at MIT, and they're not giving anyone degrees. They're doing things with executives, they're doing elective programs. They're trying to infuse design throughout the whole university. Designers are good at being bold when they're not being cowardly. And it is time for us to be bold for the world and for the field. We have a way of working that can help solve these problems, and we owe it to the world to use it. And it's time for a radical change in education. My one sentence description of what's going to happen with design education, it's going to fragment into 1,000 variations, maybe not 1,000, 200 variations. And it's going to be a free-for-all. Students aren't going to know what jobs are. Companies aren't going to know who to hire. And it will sort itself out. But for you, it's going to be a wild ride. The people who understand it will be able to take advantage of it. So that's it. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off by I'm going to ask each of you a simple question. right? How can we know, how can we make this claim that we know something about the future of something? How can we know the future of design education? So maybe Daniel, you can go first, and then Patrick.
So we know that change is coming. We don't know what sort of future is coming. And we do believe that we need to equip our students with the ability to navigate in a changing world. So this is the biggest challenge. And I don't think we need to find out what sort of professions are coming, what sort of domains or knowledge fields are coming. We need to equip the students with a very diverse skill sets that help them to adapt and be resilient in the future. So that's what I think.
I have a slightly different angle on that. I think we should have wildly different types of designers. They should be tied together with core knowledge, but then they should be developing new information and ways of working based upon the challenges they're facing as individuals. When I refer to core knowledge, I mean things, yes, like drawing and prototyping, but I also mean abstraction, taking the idea of an auditorium, a place for people to listen to speeches, and turn it into something for human interchange, which isn't an auditorium. You keep asking the question why, and you get to an abstract answer. So to answer your question, or at least come closer to answering your question, I don't think we can know. I think we should just do things that each school should do something that it can do best, either in its region or in the world, and keep trying to do the best job of it and share information with others.
So at ID, we talk about what you just described in the form of prototyping, right? Like, and what I tell my students is prototyping is a form of time travel, because a prototype is something that will become real in the future but is not yet real now. And so in a sense, what we're doing is we are reaching into the future, picking something that doesn't exist today, bringing it to today and evaluating it.
Yes.
And I think that's the culture of design that enables this.
Yes. Economists and other social scientists and engineers hate this approach because they say, what are you basing your image of the future on? And we have soft answers for them. I think you came up with the phrase, prototyping the future instead of benchmarking the past.
Right.
I use it a lot.
Oh, thank you. Everybody got that?
You can't know the answer to some of these problems until you're living it. And so we have to figure out how to prototype the answer before we're committed to building it. The good news is technological change to do with the emergence of platforms gives us the ability to create more variety without the huge costs that would be incurred if we were living in the world of mass production.
Right. Daniel, it was, your presentation was really, really provocative. I thought it was amazing, especially the image of the glass designer from Ukraine and the woman who created things on Midjourney. For those of you who don't know Midjourney or DALL-E 2 or one of those platforms, it's essentially replacing human creativity by Microsoft designers putting it into their core software where you can type in words and say, I want to create Patrick in a field of flowers. And the computer will go in and search for images of Patrick and field of flowers, put it together, and it's going to look amazingly artistic, sort of like the images that Hugh makes. But it's combined, this technological advancement is also combined with great human distress. especially in Europe. We don't see much of that here, other than in the racial issues and in the climate change issues. Tell us a little bit about how the context is different in Europe.
Well, design context is very different. When it comes to define design, we tend to say design is culture. And in Europe, it's a very old and very rich culture, very diverse culture. And in the last 10 years, this culture is getting more and more universal. Like human-centered design is everywhere. And all schools are changing from the traditional cultural approach to human-centered strategic approach. And that's in many sense very good, but in other sense, we are losing a very rich culture. In Europe, universities are funded mostly by government and paid by the taxpayer money. So young designers learn to design for society. So it's a societal, ethical issue to design, and it's very important. However, in the last 10 years, I would say, design is getting more and more capitalistic in Europe, and that creates a certain tension. Young students are getting more and more critical towards this type of large company image of design. And they are using design for activism. They are using design for social good. And I think it's a very good tendency. However, we experience a major change in the European Union at the moment. So there is a war in Europe, which has, well, the last one was the Yugoslavian war. And that makes a huge tension. And that creates a kind of fear that time is repeating itself. And yes, it is a question what the role of designers at this moment in Europe.
Patrick, you also mentioned similar things that you're noticing in Cambridge, that the students are questioning the role of capitalism.
Yes, more and more claiming interest in communism. They are losing faith that the leaders of our society can make sound decisions. I don't know how shifting to communism takes care of that problem, but everything isn't rational in students' minds. But what is even stronger is their feeling of wanting purpose. They want to know why they're doing something and what is it going to do in the world. And I applaud this. I think dealing with purpose deals with those things in the bubble above the user. Why are we here? The why are we here is an interesting question, because the way governments look at why we're here is they either decide they want to be running a manufacturing-based economy or a consumer-based economy. And they view us either as primarily units of production, us as units of production, or units of consumption. How many here think of themselves as a unit of production or a unit of consumption? How many want to be thought of that way? What we are people who, the reason we're here is to love our friends and family. And if you go back before the age of advertising, go back before 1851, it took a lot of work and a lot of money over decades to turn this into a society where buying new things is believed to be the road to happiness. I believe that people are much happier making things than buying new things. They may not know it.
So yesterday we invited two really important people home for dinner, Patrick and Vijay Kumar. And at the end of the dinner, we got into an argument and a fight. It was fueled by alcohol, I think. But what was interesting about the conversation was this idea that Vijay made the claim that every evolution of design incorporates the previous generation in it, right? And I found that fascinating. And if you think about ID's fourth generation, it's essentially started with experimentation, which got pulled into systems design, but experimentation did not go away. It became the content of system design. And system design became the process. Then system design became the content of human-centered design, and human-centered design became the process. And now we are in this new era, which many people are saying is about collaboration, about understanding different fields and complexity, and human-centered design becomes the content of a new type of process that we need to develop as a group of people, so which I think is fascinating. So I want to take the time to turn it over to the audience so that we can get some questions in. Any thoughts, comments, questions for our thought leaders here? If you can shout out the question, I will repeat it to the people online. Yes.
How much of this predicament socially, the designers find themselves in a job market, can be attributed either to institutions themselves or designers getting lost in the sea of vague job descriptions?
How much of this predicament can be attributed to institutions that are don't understand where they are versus fake job descriptions is the question. I think it's, I want you to answer. I don't know the answer to this.
Everyone is to blame. Everyone should be working to overcome it. Designers should do what they do in a way to overcome it when they see the opportunity. People who lead organizations, they're not all the same. You have leaders that are very socially conscious and aware that the world of work has to change, and you have others who just want to get the most out of their employees. It's complicated.
You were mentioning something, Daniel, this afternoon about how the makeup of the student body is also changing and how their aspirations are also changing at MoMA, right? Is there something to do with that, the way they think about their jobs and their outcomes after school?
Well, previously, students chose their career, not the career pathway, but the whole career at the age of 18 in Europe. And it tends to change very much. So they choose it at the age of 25, but recently, according to the researchers, there are no career choices. So there are career pathways and orientations and iterations and reiterations again and again. So it's a big challenge for us. How we need to structure education, because we are not educating vocations anymore. We are providing students with skill set that's suitable for the job market, which is changing constantly, so we need to supply them with the ability to constantly adapt for the changing needs of the job market.
What is your guess at the number of jobs, different employers or different activities that the student's going to do in their career?
I don't know. I don't have a right guess. I think nowadays it's like something like 10.
I think it's more than that, Patrick. If you're talking about...
I'm talking about Europe, though. That's my question.
Sorry,
Here,
in the US
here
versus...
I'm guessing, how many here who aren't Oh, no, anyone can answer. How many here expect to have more than 10 employment situations or client situations in their career? More than 5? It's far fewer than I would have expected.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's the difference between a job and an activity.
Yeah.
I think most people will have many more activities than a job.
I was thinking about jobs. So, a very stable group of people here.
Hugh?
So, I'm just trying to connect what both Patrick and Daniel are saying, and for me, it's a case of the tail wagging the dog. It seems to me that, Daniel, the situation you're describing with where students are today is that they become so routinized or so connected with capitalism that they're fitting a template, sort of in the same way that ideas started to be presented in PowerPoint, it created a certain uniformity of thinking.
Yep.
And that's about the method that is the driver of business to a greater and greater
Yep.
efficiency. But it seems to me that the things that Patrick was talking about, that design really should be focused on, are very broad and abstract and don't necessarily fit at present into jobs that exist. And in that case, the use of method is more about exploration instead of having to do everything de novo. There are ways to think and have validity because that's going to define jobs in the future. So one of the discussions we were having last night, and for everybody, there were conversations going on about Patrick's influence, is that back in the 90s when Patrick started to teach design, there was not a job that existed in the world called design strategist. But the people were trained in how to think about what opportunities were. And then the economy caught up with them and saw the value of them. And so when I listen to all of this, I think the grand synthesis is, and Patrick's provocation is to go out and look at the things at the boundaries where the landscape's not well known, to set reliable sort of navigational tools for people to think about those things, because that's going to shape the careers of those of you who are students and what those are going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes, I think the one way to think of it is we're not giving them answers for problems, we're giving them a better set of questions.
Yeah. So just to summarize this for everybody online, I can't. So the comment was that I think when in 1990s when ID was talking about human-centered design, the jobs for human-centered design did not yet exist. And in some sense, it was landscaping, it was future visioning that led to that. By the time the students were out there in the job market and actually making impact, the jobs started to appear. Design strategist jobs appeared. Business started to adopt the thinking of design strategy within it. And what Hugh is critiquing and asking us to think about is maybe it's time for us to think of the next landscape, the next set of jobs, without actually thinking of what jobs might be in the market. And we see that with our students. So just so people who are not from ID, who are here, know our career outcomes are excellent. Our career outcomes, and I tell this to anybody I meet, is that our students pre-ID and post-ID, the salary increase is 2.7x. That's 166% increase in salary. And we have a 90% placement rate. But those are for the jobs of today. What we are really doing at ID is giving them the critical basis, helping them ask the right questions so that when they get to the point where the companies and the organizations have caught up, they can actually get into those jobs as well.
And the sign of whether you're being adventurous enough is if what you're thinking of doing sounds weird. If it doesn't sound weird, you're not pushing enough.
Nicholas, just one more question, Nicholas.
So I'm now working with a giant bank, and we can't hire designers fast enough, and researchers fast enough. So we have several thousand that will grow double that probably in 5 years. But I'm also working within healthcare with a few students and looking at things like pain measurement and fiber. And so one of my questions is, building on the methods, like we have lots of methods, do we need more tools in, say, measurement for how we are designing, and more thinking about how we utilize the tools that are generative AIs and creating faster feedback loops so that we grow our design capabilities more quickly?
Yeah, just to summarize, sorry? Just to summarize, Nicholas's question is, should we be evolving new methods for measurement and doing stuff? Do you want to show the whole view?
This is a model that Andre and I and others are working on that deals with value, operations, strategy, users, and offerings. What we're doing in one model is combining issues of money and value creation and operations with the issues to do with users. That's very different from what we did 30 years ago, where we worked on human-centered design and creating more value for users, and then made the argument to companies, if you do things that are better for users, they'll be good to you. This is putting it into one model. Each one of these has a number of methods that sit outside of it. Those are standard methods. Almost none of them are new. But what's new is a content model for how design works. You know, things like the double diamond and other things like it say, analyze the problem, define the problem, analyze it a bit, maybe do some research, redefine the problem, start doing prototypes, learn more, do more prototypes, learn more, give it to the company to produce. All of that leaves out the financial questions and financial arguments. They have to be injected in there. This deals with them all from the beginning. We sit with an organization for somewhere between half a day and 5 days, depends on the complexity of it, and map out, draw from, by asking them questions that use this structure, they come up with a description of their organization that they've never heard before. It's their description, not ours. So that's a one way of dealing with the
Your
point you bring
Bauhaus
up.
3.0 also has some ideas around it.
Yeah, can I reflect upon? This discussion for me is a little bit weird. I mean, from a European perspective, design is art, and it's very hard to put in these kind of algorithms, like a very technocratic way of how to do this, and what is the value, what's the output, what. So I would approach it from a diversity perspective. Design has to be diverse, and I truly believe design has to have a kind of ethos. And this is something that human-centered design lacks. Human-centered design, which I love. It's, to be honest, I teach it and in a business school, and but it's a very technocratic approach, and it's, sorry to be provocative, but it's a kind of colonial thing. You say, may I ask the magic question, how might we? If you don't ask it, you are not professional today. Every designer asks, how might we? I hate it, you know? When I hear how might we, I get so nervous that, you know?
If you don't do it, how do you get strategic insights?
Yes. You don't get, exactly. then you have to be open, you have to be sensitive, you have to ask not one question, but 10 questions, or you have to listen for a while. So I really understand and I really appreciate and highly appreciate this type of approach. But I stick to the European, rather artistic approach when the designer is a sensitive person who has senses, and it's very hard to verbalize what is design, what is the value, but the designer role is to create it, this value.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we agreed on this afternoon is that while the European model is moving a little bit more towards process, I think the American model needs to move more towards content and to this whole idea of intuition and art and thinking through the mind. Sorry, thinking through the heart rather than the mind. With that, we come to a conclusion. Please give a round of applause to Patrick and Daniel. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming in. Patrick came in from Boston and Daniel all the way from Budapest to join us. So great, very grateful for them. So in closing, a few years ago at ID, we decided that the Institute of Design was composed of 3 units of design. The first one is the graduate school, which awards the degrees, where you go to school, you learn things. The second one is the action labs, where new knowledge is created. And the third is ID Academy, where new knowledge is disseminated broadly beyond degrees. This week, we launched both Action Labs and ID Academy formally, and we have had a great discussion about where design education is going. And all of these events are online on YouTube for you to watch or share with people. Please hashtag us, and please share it with the people who you think will benefit from hearing about ID. The celebrations do not end today. We have a live recording of one of our faculty members, Zach Pino, on Tuesday, where he's going to be talking about how technology, human biology, and sociocultural systems are coming together. And of course, we cannot forget the other big giant in the room, Vijay Kumar, whose 101 design methods is coming up against its 10th anniversary. So we're going to close out the 85th anniversary celebrations with a discussion with Vijay and where he thinks 101 design methods is going to go, and what's the next level of methods. So that's coming in November 17th. I hope you will all join us for these events. Before I close, there are several people that I want to thank who made this exhibition and events come to life, especially our friends at the Chicago Design Museum, all of the students and faculty members here. But there's this one very special person I want to thank, Kristen Geekin, our Assistant Dean for Content and Influence. Isn't that a cool title? So Kristen, thank you so much. I think like Marty, she slept here a few nights. With that, I call this amazing week to close and invite you to join us on our second floor community kitchen. And for those of you who complained about having no alcohol last event, we do have alcohol this week. As you wander over to the kitchen, I recommend that you stop at the exhibition and check out the incredible legacy of ID and the 4 eras that we have gone through. Design Museum of Chicago helped us curate it along with ID students, and it was designed by our professor Marty Taylor and his students, and it highlights 85 artifacts from our 85 years of existence. So thank you again for joining us, and please join us at the back in the kitchen on the second floor for refreshments and drinks. Thank you, and have a good evening.